What's a scientific experiment you'd be fascinated to see the results of, but could never be conducted due to ethical concerns? See if we can persuade a group of wolves to raise a child. I remember hearing about a study where scientists tried to raise a baby chimp alongside a human baby to see if the monkey would act more like a human. They had to cut the study short because the human started acting too much like a monkey. I just watched this video about this experiment. The researchers made some really careless mistakes, the first one being that they took the baby chimp, Gua, away from her chimp parents when she was 7 months old and already attached to them. Then when they cut the experiment short, they also just shipped her off from her human parents and made her live as a chimp being used in several other experiments. She died of pneumonia because she didn't have her chimp immune system or her human parents' protection. Her human brother, Donald, committed suicide in his 40s, though there's no way to know if the experiment was behind that. The experiment did lead to his development being slightly stunted, as he learned some chimp behaviors like screeching when he should have learned to talk. The saddest part of it all, though, was that Donald and Gua were really close and loved each other a lot, and when the experiment ended, they never saw each other again. I'd create an exact clone of me as a baby and send him to be raised somewhere else, by people who are as different from my parents as I can find, then meet up with him once he's, say, 30, and see how differently we turned out in terms of personality. Edit. Thanks for the silver, kind stranger. Have you ever looked up cases of identical twins that had been separated at birth and living completely separate lives with adoptive or foster parents and then met each other later in life? That's surely been documented? Or would it have to be a clone of yourself? I took psychology and sociology at university. Problem was that both used tons of twin studies, but psychology had tons of studies showing how strikingly similar the twins ended up even with very different upbringings. Whereas sociology has many examples of twins being completely different when separated at birth. Dr. Kurt Richter conducted an experiment with rats that essentially concluded that the presence of hope could prolong the ability to stay alive when faced with life-threatening circumstances. During the first part of the experiment, rats were put in a bucket of water. After about 15 minutes the rat would begin to drown. The scientist plucked the rat out of the bucket of water merely seconds before death. After a couple of days the scientist repeated this process. However, instead of drowning after 15 minutes of treading water, some of the rats survived for up to 2.5 days. The scientist concluded that the rats were able to continue swimming because they retained the hope of being rescued, as this is what they experienced during the first trial. It would be interesting to see how the concept of hope influences humans under similar circumstances. I'm sure I saw a video of that experiment, or an experiment with the same conditions. Again, fascinating. I'd have to imagine there'd be a similar result with human subjects. Maybe you're thinking of the initial experiment. He had 12 domesticated rats and 30 or so wild rats. 3 of the domesticated rats drowned within a few minutes, but 9 survived and swam for days. He then tested with the wild rats, knowing wild rats were much stronger swimmers, however they all succumbed to drowning within minutes. 1. Give a baby a proportioned weight vest all its life, increasing the weight as it gets older. When it's 11, will it be able to jump as high as all the other kids because its body has adapted? If yes, when we take it off can it jump much higher? 2. How strong can we get a gorilla by giving it a bench press set? I would not support either of these experiments for ethical reasons, Earl, but they would be cool. What's unethical about giving a gorilla a bench? I think what op means is that they choose life. We can't have a jacked gorilla deciding to walk the town one day. Gotta leave some girls for the rest of us, you know? I'd like to know how much of a human body could be replaced by cybernetics. I imagine we have cooled make a good enough equivalent to quite a few organs, but other organs I doubt could be replaced as easily. It would also be interesting to see the mental impact of having so much of your body replaced. Edit. Glad to know people found my idea worthwhile enough to comment and upvote, and I'm loving all the ideas that y'all had as a response. If you replace enough, then you don't need the cybernetics to resemble the organs at all. That was an interesting side experiment I thought of actually. Assuming you replaced a significant portion of the body with cybernetics, how would your body shape affect your mind? Like if you were just a head with your various life support systems around the room, would you fare worse than if you were a head on top a humanoid-shaped body? Edit. Changed effect to effect. I think the issue comes down to how your neural pathways develop in your brain, wired up to certain sensory and nerve connections. You'd need something to replace your organic sensory network with comparable inputs, or at least the simulation of inputs, otherwise you might be facing phantom limb pains, in your entire body from the neck down. At what stage from a lack of stimulation to a nerve do you begin hallucinating input? The rubber hand illusion can already fool the brain now. An adult has a well-defined perceived image of their self, and a set locomotion process. If you attach an extra set of mechanical arms and hook them up to the brain, can the brain eventually adapt? Rehab can be a long process for people who only damage their existing limbs, let alone add new ones in. Would a child in an exoskeleton be able to learn only with the exoskeleton to move? I'd love to see the results of more twin studies done under controlled circumstances, but splitting up twins just because I'm curious about what makes people tick. Teresa documentary on Netflix about triplets who were purposely split up when they were babies and given different social circumstances. They end up finding each other randomly years later but don't realize that they were used as an experiment for a while. I've watched that. It was amazingly interesting and sad, and still many years until the findings of the study get released. n.m.wikipedia.org in case anyone is interested. Didn't one of them commit suicide? I know there was a study but don't remember if it was twins or triplets where they found each other years later and one of them did. Yay, one of the brothers did. All three had a history of mental health issues, unfortunately. Any experiment that checks to see if a medicine is safe for pregnant ladies to consume would require trials of pregnant ladies consuming the medications before we knew the medications were completely safe. There are precious few pregnancy category A medicines. Most medications, like acetaminophen aka Tylenol, given to pregnant women are under category B. Animal reproduction studies have failed to demonstrate a risk to the fetus and there are no adequate and well-controlled studies in pregnant women. Yup, pretty much any experiment on pregnant ladies' babies. Not in, like, a disturbing horror movie way, but the kind of stuff you're talking about. The effects of various medications, various levels of alcohol consumption, testing how much shellfish and coffee actually affect a fetus's well-being, etc. Basically just thoroughly testing all the stuff that doctors disagree on regarding pregnant women and babies, like whether one glass of wine every once in a while really is okay or if any alcohol consumption at all is enough to negatively affect the fetus. It'd be nice to have definitive answers to those sorts of things. I can't imagine any way in which doing such experiments would be anywhere close to ethical, however, so we'll probably never have those answers. I can't imagine any way in which doing such experiments would be anywhere close to ethical, however, so we'll probably never have those answers. I think about the best you're ever going to get with this sort of thing is observational studies done after the event, looking at people who did or didn't do certain things while pregnant, and try to cover as wide a group as possible so you can compare otherwise similar groups to try and account for as many other variables as possible. The all-encompassing nature of pregnancy makes it hard to measure so many variables, but if tech gets good enough to really monitor certain things, it could make non-invasive research like this much more effective. OFC that same tech has dystopic tendencies. My brother and I have talked a lot about a special version of the Olympics where the competitors can use whatever and however many performance-enhancing drugs they want just to push the absolute limits of what humans can do. We figure it probably wouldn't pan out though, since most of the athletes would probably just push themselves to death. This was basically pre-1960s Olympics, haha google.com. Tawny Ain came in ninth, but might have done better if he hadn't been chased nearly a mile off course by aggressive dogs. Carbajal started well but decided to take a break from the brutal race and stopped in an orchard to eat some apples. The apples disagreed with him and so he took a nap to recover. He still finished fourth. That marathon was chaos. This sounds like some sort of mythological Greek story. Maybe Androcles really did help that lion. Neural transplants want to see someone use someone else's body for a bit. I'll volunteer. The new host couldn't possibly use my body worse than me. Gym memberships of the future. Paying someone to work out and eat healthy for you. That's actually brilliant. It would be cool if we could somehow bring back different species of human that went extinct. Like Neanderthals, Denisovan, etc. and see how they differ, if at all, from us if raised in a modern society. It's been talked about, but likely will never happen due to ethical concerns. Ethical? Not technical? Are you saying the technology is available? I mean Therese been talk with Wally Mammothsirk because they're closely related to elephants so the same could be done with human species. In Australia, there are research groups saying they might be able to bring back the Tasmanian tiger within a decade or two. If I understand it correctly, the issue is slightly opposite of the woolly mammoth. They have plenty of viable DNA, but the next closest genetic relative is like the size of a large rat, so finding how to bring it to term is a big issue. I work in this lab. The closest genetic relative is the fat-tailed dunnart, and the current plan is to carry the modified embryo to term in a Tasmanian devil, due to similar uterine environments. We're not that far off it, technology-wise, however, the big issue is ethics. Very likely that they would never be released into the wild, they would just be used in locations such as zoos as a teaching point for the conservation of Australia's marsupials and other lovely creatures' smiles. That is so duck and fascinating, thank you for writing this comment so I could learn that.